skies, firefight calls. The stakes are high, turn the flame, heroes and spies. Control fire, where strategy lies. Hear the tales, fierce and deep. Victors roar, defeated weep. We blaze a way, we don't hold back. Control fire, ready to attack.
Hello and welcome to Controlled Fire, your monthly musings on Mantic's Firefight. I'm Sam.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Luke.
So, thank you for joining us for another month. You may recall that last episode was our Asterion faction review, and one of the comments that we received for that episode was from Kyle Timberlake of the Firefight RC. Shout out to Kyle as a listener. He asked if, as well as giving our views on the units as they are in the faction review, could we give some thoughts as to how we might change the units? So we decided to do exactly that. This episode is all about taking some underplayed, somewhat unloved units and seeing what we can do to change them and make them a useful inclusion in their lists. So we have a unit clinic for Firefight. Before we jump into that, we'll do our From the Forge. Mike, what's on your painting table at the moment?
Yeah, I'm still being relatively slack. I haven't done much as far as painting is concerned, but there's been an announcement of a tournament that I normally would TO in future, which is SpringCon here in Brisbane. And Sam stepped up to run TO that at the moment. And then there's also Kings of War, which Alexi, who stepped up to do that. So I don't need to run either of those two tournaments this year. So I'm starting to look at what I want to play in those events and probably look at painting in whatever I need to fill the gaps of the army lists that I would like to be in playing in Kings of War and Firefight for those events. So yeah, and especially seeing the Sam decide to switch things up a little bit and changing from the standard format a little bit and make things interesting, it'd be good.
Yeah, I'm so excited you get a chance to play at one of these tournaments. You're always so good at running them that I really don't mind stepping in so that you can have a go at actually playing for once.
Well, my only problem is you guys set such a high bar. If I don't place in the top three, then I'm going to have to hand in my badge and can no longer be on the podcast, I guess.
Are you looking for suggestions as to what it is you should be painting and fielding for either Firefight or Kings of War at SpringCon?
A little bit. I've been asking more about Kings than I have for Firefight. I've been actually just tempted to do Forge Fathers again because I haven't played my Forge Fathers in quite a while, more than a year, I think. So I was thinking of potentially playing them. My Night Stalkers are still my pride and joy, which I have been playing probably for the last 12 months as well. So there's probably going to be one of those two. I don't think I will be playing my Enforcers. So it'd probably be either the Forge Fathers or the Night Stalkers at this point.
Awesome. How about you, Luke? What's on your painting table at the moment?
Well, what's just exited my painting table is a winged slasher for my orcs because I decided 2 days before list submission of Winter's Wrath down in Port Macquarie that I wanted to play a dragon. So I tried to print it. It failed in a rush. Adam had already offered to print it for me, so I sent him a message and he said, "I'll put it on right now." He printed it overnight. I picked it up the next day and painted it the next day and ran that. So that's my most recent painting table. But I'm back now. I've got next to me some models that you can see, but the listeners can't, but some goblins and halflings for Alexi that I'm doing. So I'm back to those, starting to churn those out. And I also bought a new printer that is sitting in a box next to me unopened because I've not been well this week. So I haven't been able to drum up the willpower to put it together. But I got a Elegoo Saturn 4 Ultra Series printer. So that's a 12K printer, which is a bit of an upgrade from my Photon Mono, but I'm looking forward to getting that out and seeing what I can print.
I am so surprised that you've been able to hold yourself back, because I just imagine you'd be tearing the packaging off and wanting to get this to the table.
Well, I'm actually caught in this place where I need to do a bit of a rearrangement in my shed. So I'm umming and ahhing about, do I pull the printer out now or do I wait until I've done a bit of a rearrangement and put it in its final home? So we'll see how we go.
Oh, awesome. And it's very impressive you've been able to paint a dragon in a day, effectively.
Yeah, and it turned out pretty good, actually. I think I made some smart choices with the color scheme and whatnot to give it that glow up.
And you did very well at Winter's Wrath as well. Second place, as I recall, so on another podium with with a brand new model in an army.
Yeah, second place to Max again. Not surprised. Max beat me again at Winter's Wrath for the third year in a row. Someone did point out that I think at Winter's Wrath every year, Max wins it, and then Paul and I come second and third, but we keep trading places about who's second and third. So that's nice.
Great marks for consistency. So for myself, I've been painting up a lot of Epic Warpath stuff, and so most of my Asterians are done now. I just have a couple of super heavies to go. We were playing some Epic Warpath at the club weekend just gone, so 2,500 point games. It means I got a chance to field the Edith's Clade Warden, and it did a great job striding through a whole bunch of plague. Very, very enjoyable game, and it just looks so cinematic when you have just these big sprawling armies of tiny, tiny people. I'm also working on my Kings of War champion stuff for my girls, but I just got to grind out the last of these Epic Warpath models as well. All right, for our unit clinic, we're going to follow a bit of a medical theme for the format. So each of us have selected 2 units that we're going to be running through, 2 units that we think are a little bit underloved and could really use a little bit of help to get them to where they need to be. We're going to run, first of all, with presentation. What is the unit overview? What are its vital statistics? What do we need to know about this unit? Then our diagnosis. What is it that we see as the problem? Why isn't this unit taken more regularly? Then we'll provide our remedy. What is the remedy only for this unit? We can't nerf everything around it that is the reason that this unit might not be taken. What would we do to fix this unit in order to make it a more viable choice or to give it its own niche in the list? And finally, prognosis. If we were to implement some of these changes, how do we think this might impact the broader list? And how might it change the way other lists might need to engage with this faction? So our first unit, straight off the blocks, will surprise no one when we're going to Luke, and it's one that he has spoken of a few times as needing a little bit of love. Luke, what have you picked to get us started?
So the first unit in our clinic is the Veermin Death Engine. So this is a support unit in Veermin for 60 points, and you can get a second one for 60 or 65, depending on the weapon options that we'll get to. Is 915 speed, which is actually quite good. Shoot 5, assault 4, armor 7, 4 hit points, 5 nerve, and height 4, which is good for seeing over some things. He's got tracked, unflinching, and vehicle, which is a bit of a downside for scoring. The weapon upgrade is the spear for 5 points, which is a range 18, 4 shots, AP1 die, pinning, and toxic. The impaler, which is the base default, is 6 die in assault with AP2 vicious assault, and the spear gets a downgrade of the assault weapon to 3 dice AP1 only. A 1 or a 2 in a support. So his diagnosis is that as a support option in Veermin, it's already a pretty heavily contested slot with Mutant Rat Fiends and the vehicle options that Veermin have. Obviously, the Vault Chaser release opened up more space with a transport and AET option in the specialist slot, but you're still competing with the Mutant Rat Fiend that provides a ton of cool stuff, including the ability to assault buildings, regen, anti-tank, terrifying. As a single model option, the Death Engines might make sense in smaller games. As a 60-point mini Mutant Rat Fiend, it's kind of a cool idea for smaller games, I think, and just a way to get a bit of a pinning gun that can also assault okay in a smaller game isn't too bad. But in a pair, 2 of the Impalers, I think, loses out to a Mutant Rat Fiend, just in versatility and raw power. 2 Spewers lose out in damage as a shooting unit to double chem thrower Rumblers, which is actually a pretty nice unit now that they can be taken in 2s. Check out the stats. They can put out a lot of hurt. The Rumblers are 10 points cheaper as well if you're taking two shooty Rumblers. So the only real spot left for these guys, I feel, is to take 1 of each, but then they're kind of just a worse version of the alternatives in both of those roles. But maybe as an overall sort of unit, they can find a spot like that. Obviously, they've got pinning on the spears, which is really nice, and that's what the Rumblers don't have. But we've already spoken about how bad it feels to spend support slots on a pinning gun. So I think that would be a feels bad here as well. Yeah, just a subpar version of the alternatives, I think.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, obviously, this is a lot more durable than the Rumblers are, right? Like the Rumblers are a reasonable range, but light on the resilience, heavy on the output unit, whereas this is a lot more durable, but really much more limited on the ranged output. It's very much a hybrid unit, isn't it? In that it can do a bit of shooting, it's reasonable in assault, it's pretty durable. In fact, I think we might be seeing other units later on, which also might sit in that kind of more hybrid role as well.
Exactly.
Again, I've not played VM. I've played against them more than a few times in there, but I don't think I played them much more recently. But I've never ever played against a Death Engine. I don't think I've ever. Oh, sorry. I think Simon actually did play them once at a tournament, but I think I might have been running that rather than playing against him with those. But I guess it's just one of those things where there's so many different options and what to take, which is probably going to be a recurring theme of this particular cast for today, really. And I think it's really trying to find something that these units do better than their competitors, and that's reason for you to take them at that point. And I think what Luke was saying earlier is the fact is it's generally been outclassed by other units in its slot.
So in terms of a remedy, Sam, what would you do to this unit?
Possibly an easy fix for this one is if you gave the unit, or just put it on the weapon, but targeting systems. That means you then have a reason to take 2 spewers, because it means the 2 of them can rumble forward and each of them can then pin a different unit. That doesn't feel too bad. You're then paying, what would it end up being, about 130 points in order to pin 2 units as you're moving forward at speed 9. And then when you do hit, you hit at 3D AP1. All the time throwing out 4D AP1 shots at shoot 5, which is not terrible, height 4, and toxic. So when those hits do get through, they will do a little bit of extra damage as well. So I think targeting systems can potentially make the unit a bit more viable as well. I know it doesn't really speak to the Impaler. When we were doing the Veerman faction episode, I was saying I actually like the idea of 1 spewer, 1 Impaler, because then I can pin on the way in and then mince when I get there. But I think targeting systems opens up a little bit of extra play.
Yeah, I would be cautious about targeting systems. I think pinning 2 targets in an activation should be allowed with care. Although you're right, it definitely would make them playable. I would definitely consider running a pair of them if they had targeting systems. And you're right, it doesn't fix the Impaler, but that would be good for the spewers. We all know my fix is just to make them specialist. Make Death Engines great again. But, I think that idea has gained about as much traction as bald tires soaked in baby oil. So I'm not sure that's going anywhere. I reckon a sweet idea would be to give the leader model the option of hitching on a trailer to give it transport capacity and reducing the speed to 714, maybe 612, but I think 714 feels better. Just sort of a 5 or 6 capacity trailer that can be hitched on. Maybe Clive, you can put a little trailer in the vault for the Death Engines and we can hitch a ride.
That would be cool. So fun. You say just for the leader model, you wouldn't make each one capable of holding, and that so it could then go to space.
It would make the the destroyed transport unit dropping out conditions a bit more weird. If it wasn't weird, then I think having one or both of them have a trailer could work. But you know what I mean? Like, is it 1 unit per trailer, or can you spread 1 unit across the 2? If it's 1 unit per trailer, sure. When one dies, you could drop its unit. But then if there was 1 unit spread across 2, that wouldn't really work. Like, I think it gets a bit janky at that point. So I'd probably just do the leader model.
Did you know that in Firefight Edition 1, the Halter half-tracks, I think, actually did have a trailer upgrade with exactly that kind of capacity idea.
Right.
I'm not sure where those trailers ended up, but I think the Halters actually used to have exactly that idea.
Yeah, cool. That's well, there you go. Great minds think alike. So yeah, overall, I think this is one of those units that's in a bad place, like we said, because it's similar to other things but not better. So fixing it does have the real risk of edging something else out. So that's where care would need to be given.
So I didn't happen to drag around the Jotuns by any chance, did they? Because the Jotuns are on a trailer base, but they don't have anything obviously pulling them around at the moment.
I think there maybe used to be like a winch type thing or something like that, like a little tow bar thing, and it was dragging around the Jotuns.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm sorry. I'm off with the fairies with Forge Father's name. But anyway, after you said that, I kind of went, oh, that kind of makes sense. But anyway, I know you talked about Malouk before, obviously in the past, but I think that was before the light tunneler was available then. So I was saying, like, going into specialists, would that change that? Because people are taking light tunnels instead of the other tunnels and freeing up more support slots.
Yeah, exactly. And also they've got the lightning guys to do anti-tank in specialists, so that opens up the space for different things to be taken as support now. That's one of the reasons I've eased off the gas a bit on the on the call out to make them specialists. But If they were specialists, they'd then be competing with other things. And I think they'd be competing with other things that they differentiate from. So your nightmares and your night terrors, they're actually similar to those, more similar to those units than anything else in the list, but they're different to those.
I should also call out, I mean, the unflinching they have, unflinching and vehicle, makes them a really interesting pick as well, in that they're only really pinned by anti-tank guns, and if they are hit by them, they're not unduly worried if they're going to be charging in. That's pretty great.
Yeah, I think unflinching is just a great rule for a combat unit. No matter. But the mutant rat fiend also has unflinching, so it's not like it gives an edge over that.
Well, let's jump on to prognosis. If we were to implement either of those change, like if we were to give them targeting systems, or if we were to drop them to specialist instead of support, what would you see being the overall impact on the list?
I would say both of those would definitely make them playable. Also, I think the trailer idea would potentially see some legs as well. I think having both, so a unit of one of each, where the leader has the trailer, and that's an impaler. So an impaler with a trailer and a spewer off the side means that you can move forward and then pin, and then charge out or whatever, and then next turn charge in with the impaler. That would make a really cool play style, and that's exactly how I feel like Veermin should be played. So that would be really cool. I would 100% play this unit if it had a little trailer that it could pop the unit in. Just a unit of 2 or 3 nightmares or something, or the Piper in a trailer behind Death Engine would be sweet.
And do you think the twin targeting systems spewers would be too good?
I'd have to think about it a bit more. I think too good. Maybe not. I mean, Veermin are kind of struggling for pinning weapons in the first place, so it's probably not so egregious, and it's probably not that feels bad for Veermin to take pinning in a support slot just because they don't have access to pinning through many other means.
It's just blaze away on their...
Yeah, blaze away, really, and I always feel so bad doing blaze aways just to pin when other factions can just take an HMG for 5 points or whatever, and then you got to take a whole unit blazing away to do the same thing. Just feels awful.
Well, we might run on to our next unit, which Mike got to pick. Mike, what was your choice for another unit in the clinic?
Going back to the old Forge Fathers, and it's the Kafi command tank. So it's a 612, shoots 4. It does have armor 7. It does have heavy armor, and it's shield 3, which is it's a solid brick. It's a real big brick, and it's really hard to kill, super hard to kill. But that's all it does. It's got an orange dice, which is a bit less than most other command vehicles that are going around, and the command order is something that obviously from Annihilation, in the fact that it allows all the vehicles to move an extra 3, which I guess in Annihilation is fine, but I always find that playing Forge Fathers, I'm struggling to take a lot of vehicles to take advantage of that, and I think that's where this particular unit is really stuck. It doesn't have the command dice. The aura isn't great for the standard version of Firefight. It's a movable blocking piece of terrain in essence, because it's daring you to try to kill it and put an awful lot of effort into it, because it's got shields of 3, it's got a shield generator, heavy armor, it's got 5 hit points. It's hard to kill, but it doesn't do much else other than that. It can't score because it's a vehicle. Again, there's other units within the command structure of Forge Fathers that have really, really good orders and dice to go with them that you're probably more likely to take.
So in terms of diagnosis, it sits awkwardly in spot. We know that Forge Fathers have some excellent command options and some quite cheap orders on those commanders as well. And often you're stuck working out which of these great options you're going to be picking. And the Kafi, because it only targets vehicles, often ends up getting left at home.
Yeah, and it doesn't put out many dice. It's 4 dice. It puts out some dice itself, but it's not a huge thing for 110 points. It's not doing a whole lot, and it probably does a really good job, as said, in Annihilation. I think it's suffering from the fact that it's been built for and designed for Annihilation, and it's not coming into the standard version of Firefight as well.
Well, what would you prescribe for this unit? What's your remedy, Mike?
Again, I think it comes down to how much we're going to play on Annihilation. Is Annihilation something that's fun, that's off to the side, or is it going to become bigger in future or whatever? But for me, if we were talking about basic standard firefight, I think some other things that need to happen for the tank to probably more to do with the infantry rather than vehicles, which of course, when we're talking about Annihilation, there's very little as far as infantry is concerned. So it falls back the opposite way with that issue then. So for me, I'm kind of looking at, can you give +1 movement within an aura to infantry with heavy armor, for example, which would give some extra movement to those to the Forge Fathers. I mean, the downsides of Forge Fathers in general are the fact that they are a bit slower and the weapon ranges are shorter. So that's kind of where I would be looking at probably making an order to improve the Forge Fathers in that regard and give you a reason to take them, whether you can increase the range of weapons or you can make them a little bit faster. I'd be kind of looking at that. And as well, you'd probably want to change it to a green dice like most of the other factions for their vehicles as well. I know Sam and I have discussed this a few times. I'm personally I don't mind the fact that we potentially lose shields. I'm quite happy and comfortable that Asterians have shields. I know there's a shield obviously in Beerman. I'm a bit of a purist in the fact that I quite like that Forge Fathers have heavy armor across the board and Asterians have shields and things like that. So that part doesn't worry me if it will reduce the cost and bring things into play. But I think at the moment, yeah, that's kind of what I'd be aiming at. I'd be looking at increasing the dice to a green and having an order that would improve the infantry side of things within the Forge Father faction.
I 100% agree on upgrading to a green command die, just because all the other vehicle commanders are a green die or better. While we're there, I think we could probably also make this unique as well. I think all the other vehicle commanders are unique, and this one is never taken in multiples because it's never really taken. So if we're going to be making it better, let's also just make sure that we're not going to make it be spammable. I'm not sure about it also affecting infantry. I guess I'm thinking most of the vehicle commanders tend to really only affect vehicles, but they do so in a meaningful way. So if we look at, in our Best in Class episode, we looked at the Canis, and the Canis is fantastic, even though it only targets vehicles. It gives way to fire, and that's exactly what you want. The Propagator in the Plague only is a vicious order, but only for vehicles. The Marauder one I think the Raider from the Marauders is actually the closest one to this one. Admittedly, the Raider is green, and I think is taken because it is green. But that also has an order which gives 3-inch extra move, but to walkers. And in Marauders, that does also include scoring units, because it can be your stunt bots and your grunt bots as well as your Ripper mechs now. This order really only improves non-scoring units. I think in some ways it speaks to that Iron Ancestors and the like are probably a little underplayed in Forge Fathers. This gives a great boost to Iron Ancestors, but that said, no one's really taking Iron Ancestors so much, and so they're not necessarily needing to take this in order to boost them. What I think would be interesting, were I to remedy it, is I think if they drop the cost of the order, because making this one cost 1, I don't think would be the end of the world either. It means that you can then give it a green die, make the order cost 1, then you don't mind dropping the order if it only costs 1 in order to throw an Iron Ancestor in or get an extra 3-inch speed on your slow vehicles. Or keep it at the cost it is and have it give sure-footed or elite or something like that to the vehicles around it. So it also gives a little bit of a combat buff as well. I would also be really interested to see if, in addition to speeding up movement, it also allowed walkers within its aura range to claim objectives. That, I think, would make things very interesting, because you can then take your Kafi and a couple of Iron Ancestors and have those Iron Ancestors be scoring units. I think that'd be a really interesting play for them.
Yeah, that would be interesting. And when you talk about Forge Fathers in particular, they can't really spam those support units. So it's not like you're going to have 3, 4, you're not likely to have 3 or 4 walkers that otherwise couldn't score that now can. You're talking more maybe 1 or 2. So yeah, I don't think that would be broken. I did have a note down here as well that maybe similar to how the Marauders get the speed on their walkers, Forge Fathers could also give it to wield so that the Brocker bikes can get that extra speed as well. Gives a bit more play to the order. Mike, you're right. Forge Fathers with shields has always given me the ick. I wouldn't be exactly averse to dropping that off. But would it kill them to give this thing a gun that's worth a lick. Like, the gun is pretty terrible. So, I agree with fixing the order, aligning it with the other faction's command vehicles, all that sort of stuff's a good start. But it does need a gun that you care about shooting. Like whether it's pinning or anti-tank or just good, like AP2 and maybe like 6 dice or something. Interestingly, because it benefits from its own order, right? And we've discussed the fact that it's a brick, but it's a brick that doesn't do anything other than be a brick. What if its gun was a shorter range, so you want to push it in their face and you want to use its order so that it itself can get there slightly quicker? So maybe a 12-inch gun, but a 12-inch gun that's actually pretty good. So you want to be pushing it forward, and then it is like a movable piece of terrain that you actively want to have in their face. That could be fun.
I don't know about going all the way up to 6D. In some ways, you kind of need to base the gun on what's on the vehicle, and it is just like a guy with his head out the hatch holding a sort of a pin tool type thing. But I like the idea of potentially stripping out Blaze away and giving it pinning instead, because then it has a definite purpose, right?
I mean, I know compared to Marauders find it a bit more easier to get vehicles in their list than Forge Fathers do. Like, you'd be lucky to see a Forge Father with more than 3 vehicles in a list. Certainly since command protocols came out, and even then, sometimes that's halters. I mean, halters actually the one thing that actually really, really does benefit from this order.
Yes,
but you don't see an awful lot of those around in the case. So I think that's one thing you've got to be careful with Forge Fathers, is because it is, Luke did say it, and the fact is it's very, very difficult to spam stuff because everything's so expensive in that particular list. Yeah, it does need something. If it has to be to do with vehicles, then I think making something like Walker's Score would be a good idea. I think. If nothing else, I'll start taking Thors and start charging down the table.
I also nearly forgot that the Dozer Blade is way too expensive an upgrade.
Oh, yeah.
I would almost give it for free as an option, but maybe it's worth 5 or 10 points. Going up to Armor 8 is fine, but, Speed 9, sure, it gets better assault, but it becomes Speed 9 on a charge. So it's kind of hard to get it anywhere worthwhile.
Well, so remember, this is Speed 12. Because it will benefit.
Yeah, but it goes
from
down
its own
to
order.
True. It can benefit from its own order and go 12, but so, it's still only 3 dice. It's nothing to write home about. Maybe 10 points. It goes
up
for the upgrade,
but it's not assault by much.
It gets a better assault. It gets an extra die and an AP on the assault, and it gets an extra armor. I had never even thought
of charging this in. It's assault 6. So
yeah, exactly, right. It does go to Armor 8, but that's only 1 armor, and it goes down 3 in speed. Like, it's probably not worth
10 points.
Yeah, it's not worth nothing. It's not worth nothing.
In the same way you buy a stealthy upgrade for 10 points, which is effectively a -1 on the shoot. This is a +1 on the armor. I think that's reasonable. So.
A +1 on the armor and a slightly better assault.
Exactly.
But there is also a downside. So you get 2 upsides to 1 downside. So 10 points seems reasonable. I definitely wouldn't be paying 20 for it.
My pick is actually one that runs across a number of factions. I have picked one which is in the GCPS, Marauders, Plague, and Maison Labs. It is the Bronco Armored Car, aka Blackwing Bronco Armored Car, aka Despoiler Armored Car. All the same vehicle. So let me quickly run through the unit. I'll start with the GCPS version, which is the closest to base. It is speed 915, shoot 5, and assault 6 if you ever get into combat, armor 7 with 5 hit points. Its keywords are heavy armor, vehicle, and wield, and its weapons are a 24-inch range gun that either fire 3D AP4 shots with anti-tank, devastating D2, and marksman, or fragmentation shells, which are 2D, AP1, blast D4, and pinning. The distinctions between each of the units: the GCPS version can buy stealthy for adaptive camouflage for 10 points. The Maison Labs version costs 5 points more. It costs 125 points instead of the normal 120 to gain headstrong, but is otherwise exactly the same base. It may buy a beam weapon, which costs 0 points, which loses both the previous 2 shooting options and instead gives you a 36-inch range gun, which is not bad, 4D, AP2, seismic, way to fire 2. The Marauders, their Bronco armored car costs 5 points less because they lose marksman on their penetrator shells. Their AT shots don't have marksman. They also have the option for 15 points, which is not inconsiderable, to buy a shredder cannon, which replaces the gun, and instead gives 2 range 24 5D guns, both with pinning and targeting systems. So there's the pinning 2 targets with 1 round of shooting. And finally, the Plague. Theirs costs 120, the same as the GCPS version. They also lose marksman off their anti-tank shells. They instead gain plague-infused shells instead of the pinning cannon, which is 3D AP1 blast D2 instead of D4, but with toxic and vicious shoot. They also gain a spiked ram, which is 3D AP2 if they happen to charge in something with their assault of 6. So that's all the versions of the Bronco armored car. What's my diagnosis of this unit? Well, in 3 out of the 4 lists, it's competing with the Wolverine, and that's probably about the major things that sinks it straight away. It's competing range 24 against range 48, Dev D2 versus Devastating 2, Armor 7 versus Armor 8, 5 hit points versus 6, and you're always going to make that upgrade when the difference is only 15 to 20 points. There's a lot of value in those 15 to 20 points. All you're gaining is a little bit of extra speed, but on a unit that doesn't score. Do we have any thoughts on why else people might not want to take the Bronco in any of its versions?
You're right. The biggest problem that the Bronco has is the Wolverine. With the rule is that we can't necessarily talk about what we're going to like increasing the points of costs of other units. Then the points costs of the Bronco's car needs to come down instead. So because you're right, if you're looking at the 2 units, why wouldn't you try and define the extra points to go to a Wolverine?
It seems like a very, very simple upgrade to make.
Yeah, and it's not that many points. So yeah, like it's just, again, just a bad version of something else. I think that's going to be a theme.
I was going to say, the Maison Lab one with the double shredder cannons is actually quite interesting.
Oh, it's Marauders who have double shredder.
Sorry, the Marauder one. It's got double shredder cannons, which makes it quite interesting, actually. But it gives an alternative action. It said you can, with 2 lots of 5 dice that you can actually pin units with.
Yeah, and 2 units because they've got targeting systems on the guns.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that's actually not a pretty interesting vehicle.
Like it's 100. It is 130 points. Like it's if you want to pin 2 units, you can take 2 minimum
mules.
Marauders or mules. Oh yeah, you can take 2 mules for significant. You can take 3 mules for that price, each with HMG and pin 3 targets. You
wouldn't be able to do this one action, but you'd have 3. Yeah,
I would take 3 mules over a Bronco shredder any day. Actually,
Yes.
Crazy.
Yeah, now you put it that way around, I would agree with you.
Yeah. And similarly, the Maison beam weapon, I love that you get the extra range, but then you also look and go, 36-inch range gun. That sounds like a laser cannon. And it's 1 AP less than a laser cannon. 1 shot more, but 1 AP less. And it has seismic instead of anti-tank. So it kind of loses the main reason you take that kind of gun. Would any of us have a remedy for any of the versions of the Bronco?
If it's going to stay with the weapon options that it's generally got, then it needs to come down in price and probably by at least 10 or 15 points to give it a good 20 to 30 point change over to a Wolverine at this point.
I agree. It may need a points drop, but going that far, you start moving it towards the Tank Buster Strider, and it is better than a Tank Buster Strider.
But yeah, and I agree with that. As I said, but I'm trying to follow the rules of the conversation. I think the elephant in the room is there's another vehicle that needs changing more than this one does. So
yeah, a slight points decrease would probably help, but I just think for the most part the guns are too similar to other things that do the job better. So I would rather see interesting gun options on them rather than necessarily playing with just points. Yeah. I don't know what those would be, but I think interesting gun options are the playing space for units like this instead.
Yeah, I mean, I do think if we were to knock 5 or even 10 points off the Bronco, it probably wouldn't be the end of the world. For the Marauders, I was looking at its shredder cannon, and if that upped to AP1, and even if it didn't even have a points upgrade cost, would you upgrade it for 0 points if it had AP1? That's 10 shots at AP1 then.
Yeah, for say 110 point, like if it went down 5 base to 110, for example, and then you consider AP on the shredder cannon, I would think that you could get away with a 5-point upgrade the shredders at that point, back up to 115 that it currently is. I'm just thinking, looking at it as a 115-point unit with the 10 dice at AP1 targeting systems pinning. So you're putting a couple of wounds out, on 2 different units with the pinning shots makes it an interesting option, and it makes it something to consider over just running 3 mules. Yeah, that would be interesting.
Because you might actually do damage then rather than just pinning 2 units. Because just AP1.
I guess the main option with it, right, like, when you're talking about the fact that it's targeting systems and pinning, is that there's just so many options in Marauders for pinning guns.
Yeah.
You're not, in another faction without as much access to pinning, this would be such a great unit because, you can, like Plague, like if it had the shredder cannons in Plague, that would be very interesting because they lack pinning in a lot of units.
Oh no! But my Plague have so much pinning because most of my ghoul units have HMGs.
But you play lots of ghouls, and that's kind of what you have to do to get the pinning.
But they have HMGs on their mules as well, right? So, but if this were Maison Labs, I 100% agree. Although they can take autocannons on their mules. I mean, I guess this then brings it up to the regular mule autocannon is 3D AP1, and this then becomes 3 and a bit autocannons.
Yeah.
For the Maison Labs one, I mean, I would love if it just came up to AP3 flat and gained anti-tank and drop seismic. That means it then has a definite role, which is it's a laser cannon that hits more accurately. But I really love the idea of, because it's kind of a weird science weapon, that we might be able to do something like we did with the Veerman shotgun, which gives it the exploding 8s. And so it has that sort of more variable damage because this is the cutting edge of science. You don't know what it's going to do.
As soon as you said weird, that's exactly where my head went. As soon as you said weird science, like that's something like the shock cannon or whatever in Veerman is exactly where my head went.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that would also then feel very flavorful and fun as well. Another way my thoughts went on it as well is just to represent the sort of the longer the beam focuses on it, it can have like a variable AP, and the AP is X, which is equal to the number of hits scored, which I think could be fun. It then swings very low or very high. What
could have been fun actually in the Veerman ones as a bit of a aside, but maybe that could be something considered here for the Maison Labs, is I really like the Stormforged Shrine, the Orcs in Kings of War, how the number of hits you get on a target can then bounce as shots onto another unit nearby. So it actually bounces between units. That feels like it could be fun.
Like a chain lightning sort of thing?
Exactly. I think that's what the rule is even called. But something like that on units like this would be very interesting, right? Because you might never be able to see, like they might be hiding something behind a building that they don't want seen. But if you can like zap a unit next to them and have it chain onto that unit, obviously it's not going to deal as many dice. It's only a few dice at that point. So it's not necessarily game breaking, but it's like, you can't hide from me. I'm going to bounce these shots off another unit. That sounds fun.
I'm going to take this trick shot off that unit onto you.
Yep.
And similarly for the Despoiler, I would be happy if it lost Vicious Shoot, but increased to Blast D2+1. It gives it a slight extra boost onto its anti-infantry shooting then, because it's lost the marksman on its anti-tank shots. So it then becomes something that can shoot at tanks, but you're probably taking a tank buster strider to do that. Instead, this is something which shoots and kills infantry, and it's got toxic and all that sort of stuff. The other reason I pull Vicious off it as well as boosting up the blast is because then it can keep the points down, but it also then benefits from the Propagator, because the Propagator has an aura vicious vehicles only. And it feels so silly to have the command version of this exact same vehicle sat next to the other one and the aura not benefit from it. If we were to make these changes to the Bronco, how do you see the impact on the list? Would you see them played?
I think you'd be more likely to see them, but I don't think it's enough to make anyone go out and buy one.
Mm-hmm. Would you feel good about taking one?
I wouldn't feel too bad about taking one. If I really wanted to play one, I would feel fine.
Mike, you're not feeling that this would make things too overpowered on the Broncos?
Oh, I wouldn't say overpowered. And I go back to the fact that there's something else I'd rather have. And that's kind of where I keep sitting. I kind of go, yeah, I might take one and I'd be but I take it because knowing that I'm deliberately taking something that's not as good as something else I could have. And I've done that, and I would do that. And I've certainly done that before. I could do that with my Night Stalkers list, actually, for other reasons. But I don't think you would see many more, even with those changes, with something else in the list priced as it is.
So as a 20-point discount on a Wolverine, it doesn't feel worth it for like the penetrator shell ones, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're starting to talk 25, 30-point discount on a Wolverine, that starts to become a lot more viable.
Okay.
And I think I agree there, because it's very easy to go, well, I want an extra 30 points to do something else. And, I can go from a Wolverine to a Bronco and get that 30 points. It's probably not worth it.
So we've probably pushed the Bronco as far as we can go, but there's probably extra changes that'd need to happen for it to really shine. All right. That's probably about as far as we can push it.
I'm not saying nerf the Wolverine to make the despoiler, well, to make the Bronco better. I just think that the Wolverine needs to go up in price regardless of what's happening with the Bronco. And should that happen, and should the Bronco get a 5-point decrease, it would overall make the Bronco a lot more viable.
Awesome. All right. Well, Luke, you have our next unit. What have you picked?
So next we've got the Strider, and really this was picked in the context of Enforcers, but considering it's available to a number of factions and GCPS is the vanilla standard, we'll start with the GCPS one and then we'll talk about the differences in the other factions. So the Strider is 80 points, which is, actually not too bad for a support unit. He's shoot 5, assault 5, armor 7, hit points 5, nerve 5, height 4 in GCPS, with heavy armor, vehicle, walker, and controlled fire, the best charge reaction. By default, it comes with a heavy burst laser, which is range 24, 6 dice AP1 pinning gun, and assault weaponry of 3 dice AP1. You can upgrade to an urban assault for side grade to an urban assault for 0 points, which changes the gun to a heavy flamer, which is range 12, 4 dice AP1, it burns, and a chainsaw, which is 4 dice AP3 and assault with frenzy 1. Or the only way that most people run these in factions outside of GCPS, which is the Tank Buster, which is a Polaris cannon for the gun at range 24, 2 dice AP4, anti-tank devastating D2 plus 1, which is probably the nicest thing about Strider. You can get a veteran pilot upgrade for 10 points, which gives marksman, and a shoulder rocket upgrade for 5 points, which is the once-off, 18-inch blast rocket shot. In terms of Enforcers, then, it goes up 20 points, which is a fair bit, but what you get for that is it goes down to shoot 4, down to assault 4, down 2 to nerve 3, and otherwise it has the same options, but it has advanced training on there as well. Maison Labs is up 10 points from the GCPS, and it's got the same stat line, but it gets designation Blackwing and Headstrong. And the Plague Strider, I think, is exactly the same as the GCPS one. So
it goes up to assault 4.
Ooh, assault 4, but for the same
loses
points.
The veteran pilot upgrade.
That's the difference. So the base one, without, if you discount the upgrade because you pay for it, then it's actually slightly better because it goes assault 4 for the same cost as the GCPS one.
Yeah, and so on paper, that is better. Of course,
in that faction.
In that faction, you have better assault options than an urban assault strike.
And you've already got to worry about the fact that this is a vehicle, and you've got plenty of beasts in play. So our diagnosis for this is that, again, it's just outclassed by other options. In Enforcers in particular, there's the Nova Shocks, which I love running. I love running 2 of them, which is a little bit more expensive than a Strider for the same kind of role, but, they're pretty compact, durable. They output more, significantly more damage than the Strider does. They can claim objectives and do all that sort of fun stuff and benefit from a few of the orders that the Strider can't. The stats on all of the Striders are kind of reasonable, particularly the Enforcer one with that shoot of 4. Makes it much more viable, even though it's 20 points more, I think, than the other ones for a Tank Buster style. Assault, obviously, dependent upon the faction that they're in, depends upon how good it really is as an assault vehicle, but it can fill that niche in GCPS or something like that. So I don't think it's quite as terrible in GCPS as it is in Enforcers, particularly in Enforcers with the support slot being something that you get barely many of. I just don't really think that it's overly viable.
The support slots are just so precious, it can be hard to fill it up. I noticed that a lot of the ones we're picking here are actually support. I guess it is the most precious slot, right? But I agree with what you were saying about GCPS. I do take an Urban Assault Strider in my GCPS just so that I do have a little bit of counterpunch, or I've got something which can walk up and force people to stay a little bit at arm's length so that I can shoot them. And that's exactly what the Urban Assault Strider is for. And I do also take a Tank Buster Strider, as you say, in my Plague, just because it gives me a way to actually reach out and bust vehicles. Otherwise, I need to run out and punch them. I think it's really tough in Enforcers, as you said, though, just because at 100 points base and then 120 to make that a Tank Buster, and with Nova Shocks already in list, and you're not really looking at, I mean, we've spoken before, Enforcers don't have much in the way of order support for assault, and so you're probably not looking at the Urban Assault Strider, and you've got other assault options you're also not taking anyway. Although the Enforcers don't have quite so much in the way of pinning in faction, you're probably not burning a support slot in order to throw out 60 AP1 pinning shots either.
No, everything that this does, Enforcers do better in other slots. So you can take AT shots in your troops that are arguably better than the Strider. And no, you are not paying 100 points for a pinning weapon in support when you can take a 4-man Pathfinder squad with a dog drone for 100 points as an unlocking troop slot. Like, and they have scout, so they can get into position better. Like, that's just a better unit than the Strider, and they can score. In a faction where that exists, like, you're just not taking the Strider for that. I think the only times I've ever seen people run a Strider in Enforcers are where they've gone, I'm pretty new to the game. This is what I have, and the model's cool, so I'm going to run it. And then once your collection builds up and you realize that they're actually terrible, you stop running them.
Probably fine in Annihilation, though, where they're actually able to score. And
in Annihilation, I think they're fantastic, and I would run like 8 of them.
Spam Schaefer.
Right. But, well, you don't have that many options in Annihilation, to be quite honest, particularly in Enforcers, right? Enforcers have very few. Yeah. Enforcers have very few options when it comes to Annihilation. I think the best build that they've got is to spam Striders and maybe like combat drones.
So how do we fix it?
I'm going to cheat, but I think walkers in general in firefight are in a bit of trouble. At least in this country, from the tournaments that I've seen and run, they're very rarely taken. And I'd actually be looking at proposing to take away the vehicle keyword from the walkers. The premise of that being is because grunt bots don't have them, and they're just walkers. So and I realize that means that they can then just be pinned by a HMG, but at least then they'll be able to score, and they're only US 1, but at least then they'll be able to score. That's kind of where I'm leaning to. And if worse comes to worse, then change the walker keyword to actually say it can only be pinned by anti-tank weapons at that point, if that's the bit that you want it to have.
There's a few other walkers you wouldn't want that to be applying to, I think. There are some other things like Krastovor and so on are also walkers. And I don't always agree about not seeing walkers, because we do see a goodly amount of stunt bots, right? I mean, I think it really does depend on the faction. Like, stunt bots, you'll see loads of in Marauders, to the point that you do actually see Raiders being taken quite a bit. I do agree on Iron Ancestors. I do see Striders in GCPS and in Plague. I mean, I play them. But I certainly agree on things like Iron Ancestors and Striders in Enforcers, definitely.
It probably depends on what you define an objective as to whether it fits the flavor of the game, right? So is an objective like some radio that you have to manipulate, or is it some other point to contest? Because it's very cinematic in a lot of sci-fi to have someone in like a big walker suit holding in zone or an area against the onslaught of the enemy and being that linchpin. So I wouldn't even care too much if walker vehicles could take objectives as if they didn't have vehicle. Overall in the game, I wouldn't think that would be a terrible change to the game at all, because it would actually help to fix a lot of these units that people don't take that often. Like we get with the Iron Ancestors, right? Most people only really take them for the anti-tank shooting. Most people only take them take the Strider in other factions for the anti-tank shooting. It would actually make the other kinds of those walkers be more viable, I think, if they could hold objectives rather than sitting up the back steady aiming and shooting tanks.
Those kind of walkers are going to be more maneuverable than something grinding around on treads or hovering on an anti-grav thing. They can go over there and plug some numbers into a satellite uplink or something like that, potentially.
Yeah. I think that could work. And they can just lean out the side of it and tappy if they have to, The mech doesn't even need to have hands.
I was also going to call that, of course, the other walker vehicles, like the Spectra Blade Master, are taken as well. I think it really is that more an Iron Ancestor problem and an Enforcer Strider problem than a global problem, but I do think you can probably give a bit of a nudge anyway.
I think we'll have to agree to disagree. I mean, I know some people do take them. Like there was an example in our Clash of Protocols in that had a GCPS list had 3 Striders in it, and I get that. But of all the GCPS lists I've seen, a Strider is rare. They take something else instead. So it's like that was kind of like, wow, someone took 3 Striders, got on them and everything else. But it's not often. So there are examples where I would say, yes, I do see walkers, but in general, I don't.
But I think we'd see more if they could score, and that's kind of my point, right?
Like that's
I don't disagree.
There's an interesting space to explore, I think. And in terms of like, in the absence of fixing walkers in general, for the Strider specifically, I think cheapening them slightly, 5 or 10 points, depending on the faction, might be worthwhile. I would actually change the veteran upgrade to be weight of fire 1 instead of marksman. I know it's not as good on the ones with more dice because marksman possibly edges it out, but most people are taking the Polaris. They're not taking really if they care about the shooting. So they're either taking the urban assault, and they don't really care about the shooting at that point.
I don't think I've ever seen a burst laser ever.
It doesn't help that was originally the metal or resin upgrade, right? And so you actually needed to specifically go out of your way in order to get that burst laser.
Yeah, definitely don't do that. If it was weight of fire 1 instead of marksman, so the problem with making the Strider 3 dice instead of 2 is that the upper cap potential for hits is now 3. And that's pushing it into way too destructive territory for its points. Marksman's meant to be, hey, you're a bit better at but like just when you're shooting on 4s for most factions, like
factions.
Sorry. When you're shooting on 5s for most factions with only 2 dice, marksman, it just feels so bad. Like I'm not paying for marksman on those. It's just going to work for you so few times. But if I've got a 50% chance to get an extra hit when I would have only averaged 1, that starts to feel a lot better. And that starts to feel like it's got a place more as I can reliably get a hit or 2 rather than I can destroy a tank in one go.
We know just how good weight of fire on these kind of weapons is. Like there's a reason the Peacekeeper Captain is so good, and there's a reason the Canis is so good when it's able to give weight of fire to these low shot volume but high impact shots. I appreciate that paying 10 points for marksman does feel a bit much, and re-rolling 1s doesn't feel terribly impactful. I think weight of fire might be a little strong, but I also appreciate it's better than
you can point it appropriately, right? Like instead of being 10 points, it could be 15.
My Plague are a little sad then that they miss out. They'll just have to have the cheaper Striders, I guess. I agree. I think dropping the points on the Enforcer one, even though it does have plus shoot, plus assault, plus nerve, plus advanced training, even though you think that you're paying 5 points for each of those boosts, but it doesn't make it a 20-point better unit. I do honestly think at 80 points, the regular GCPS Strider is dated correctly and pointed appropriately, and it's fine. Ditto the Plague one. But I do think you could probably knock 10 points off the Enforcer Strider and bring it down to 90, and also knock 5 points off the Maison Lab Strider and knock it down to 85. Then you're paying 5 points for Headstrong instead of 10.
Yeah, because things have to be pointed in the context of the list that they're in as well, right? Like if you drop the cost of a Strider too low in a faction that can spam troops to unlock a bunch of Striders, then that's a big problem. But you're just 100%. Never achieving that with Enforcers. So it's a completely different context.
I was also thinking that for getting people to take the heavy support Strider, originally I was thinking similar to what we were talking before with the sort of, do you have an alternate fire mode with targeting systems and you can pin 2 units and so on? Because we've spoken a bit about that with the Shredder and with the Spitters. I was actually mulling that I think it'd be more fun to give it something like giving it some kind of strafe keyword, where you can either fire 6D AP1 or 3D AP1 strafe, where you, after you have finished resolving your attack against the first target, you may attack a second target within 3 inches. And it's basically you just blazing away in this line, and you can potentially pin 2 units, but it's not quite as egregious as targeting systems on a cheap unit like this. It feels fun.
It would be limited just to 2 units within some range of each other rather than targeting systems, which is pew-pew over there and pew-pew over there.
Yes.
So that could be interesting. It would be more interesting, I think, if you could nominate how many dice you were putting at each unit. Just say, I'm shooting at these 2 units with strafe because they're within 3 inches of each other or 6 inches or whatever. And I'm going to put 2 dice at that unit. because I'm just looking for a pin, and 4 dice at that unit because I'd like to put a bit more wounds on it. With 6 dice to play like that, it's not. No, you might put 1 on one unit just to try and YOLO a pin out, and then put 5 on the other one because that's where you want the damage. That's not bad. Like that's not too good. That seems fine when you talk about just that unit in particular. So that'd be interesting.
Well, Mike, you take us on to your next pick. What have you chosen for us?
So I guess it's my other army, which is the Night Stalkers. And the unit I've looked at here is the Fiends. Well, this one's a specialist slot, so it's not one of the support slots in here, but it's 915. It doesn't shoot. There's assault 5, armor 5, 3 hit points, etc. You get 3 models to the unit for about 90 points. You do get 3 dice in assault, and it's AP1 and vicious, very similar to Reapers in that regard, except for you get more models in for Reapers, and Reapers are a true choice. And it's kind of suffering from the same sort of thing as I said before. Depending on what you want to take it for, there is something else that does it better. If you want something that's quick, then you can take Void Rays. If you want war wounds, you can take Butchers. The biggest thing I actually find strange about it is something as specialist as its assault version of 5. For a dedicated assault unit, you're only talking, I think, Needle Fangs, and I suppose even the mutants aren't actually dedicated assault units, which are assault 5. So I find it a little strange that it's there, and I think it's sort of because it's got sure-footed that they've made it assault 5.
Yeah,
so
I
to
agree.
me, one of the things I'd look, but the thing is, they're on the damn 60 millimeter freaking base. Like, the chances of you not being hindered if you're playing with the standard recommended terrain of 10 to 15 pieces of terrain and 10 to 15 pieces of obstacles on a 60 millimeter base, it's going to get hindered no matter what. So,
But you're not going to get hindered with this, right? Because it's sure-footed.
well, that's right. But the thing is, though, they've made it sure-footed and made it assault 5. So going on, I guess, on the remedies, one of the things I'd be looking at is making it at least assault 4.
If I'm not mistaken, they used to be in Kings of War melee 4, but with lots of attacks. I think that weren't they one of those ones that were 24 attacks to melee 4, so more dice but worse assault. I feel like that's how they used to be.
I can't remember what they used to be in 3rd edition. In 4th edition, they're not too bad.
They're melee 3 with 18
attacks.
attacks. Yeah, they're 18 attacks with melee 3 in 4th edition. But I feel like they used to be like melee 4, but with 24 dice, which would make sense as a translation then to 5 fighters being they don't hit quite as well, but they've got lots of legs, so they can hit lots of times.
Yeah,
It's also worth mentioning their extra attack as well, the Ravenous Maws. They will have that 1 extra attack, 1D AP3 anti-tank as well. But it is a little bit of a janky mix then, because you've then got like the 3D AP1 vicious attacks for shredding infantry and a single 1D AP3. Admittedly, if you've got 3 in the unit, that's 3D AP3 anti-tank. That's a laser cannon that's just punched you. But you have to get in there first.
There's a few different things that I would probably look at, and I don't think you'd put all of them in, but it's a choice. So one of them, I think the assault value needs to drop to 4. And it comes down to, I think, again, I don't believe the 60 millimeter base or the really big bases in Night Stalkers has actually been factored into a lot of things when they came out and they were tested. I could be proven wrong, but I don't think that's the case. Another one is potentially, as I said, is unflinching. There is no unflinching in the Night Stalker list, and we get pinned by everything. And pinning's a great way of getting past the stealthy, and there's nothing in there, so it would then give something in the Night Stalker list that is currently not available to it. But then again, it might be something that the rules committee have decided that they don't want the Night Stalkers to ignore pinning, which again is potentially fine in that regard. And to me, that's kind of what I've been looking at. Either one is, I think they need to go to assault 4. Reapers are 4. Dread Fiends 4. These are the kind of the middle child in that particular family. And yet it's assault 5. I find it a little bit strange.
I'd be a little bit wary about making them assault 4, because with sure-footed and assault 4, it means they always hit on 3s effectively, unless they're charged themselves. But any time they charge with their speed of 15, it means they're hitting on 3s. That's pretty great. It kind of then sets them up into an output competition with the Reapers. In terms of diagnosis, I agree that where they sit right now is uncomfortably with Reapers, just because Reapers are excellent and they're true. And these are on bigger bases with a similar number of attacks, but with fewer models. What are they even doing? I don't know if I'd aim to up their output as much by increasing their assault. I'd actually be interested in going another way and increasing their durability, because that is one thing that Night Stalkers don't have a lot of. And so I see their armor 5. I'd be really interested in making them armor 6. because then they're armor 6 stealthy with 3 wounds each, admittedly on chunky bases, but it gives you a little bit of durability in a list which doesn't really have too much of it, and it gives them a distinct use to what you see in the Reapers. The Reapers will charge in and kill things, and then they'll die when they're charged back because they're only armor 4, admittedly 2 hit points each. Whereas these things can then charge in, and then they're armor 6, and so they hang around. I think that gives them a different use to the Reapers. If we were to also increase the assault, I think you'd have to increase their points commensurately. I think you then start losing the gains there.
I agree with the armor 6 call as opposed to sort of going down to assault 4. Also, every film where you've got an arachnid style monster, they keep functioning with, you know, their legs get blown off and they still keep coming at you. So something like resilient could be quite flavoursome for them as well. Just like resilient 1 on the unit. I'm just thinking like, you know, they get legs blown off and they just keep coming at you. Because that's really cinematic as to, you know, sort of how these kinds of things are represented in a lot of media. So on top of the sort of bit more, you know, tankier, resilient approach to them, you know, as you say, the Reapers exist and they're charge 14, which is only 1 less than the charge 15 of the Fiends. And yes, again, I know we said no nerfs to other units, but hear me out. What if Reapers weren't designation hunter? Like as a troop, they don't need the Dream Hunter buff. They're so good even without that. It's just not necessary on them. But that would give Fiends this niche of being the, you know, the Dream Hunter, like one of the things that pair with a Dream Hunter. So if you want to go that Hunter build, you would favor Fiends as your assault unit over the Reapers. That feels like a good niche for them.
I think distinguishing them from the Reapers is probably the key thing here. Just they're playing in different spaces then.
The only thing I go on there is like the Dread Fiend, for instance, but again, that's which is the bigger daddy of the same thing. It does have assault 4 and it's also sure-footed, but it also gains terrifying in the meantime, as well as heavy armor as well. So it's kind of like it is a bigger version of all the different bits and pieces of what's a normal.
What if the Dread Fiend? What if the Dread Fiend gave Aura Headstrong to them?
That would be fun.
So if they're near a Dread Fiend, they get Headstrong.
They do just seem to be a strange unit when you look either up or down compared to the Fiend or the Dread Fiend. It's not quite sitting in the same sort of space, and I think that's kind of where it needs to align itself to. You know, is it going to be like the little brother or sister, or the mummy or daddy unit that sits in there? But at the moment, it's not really copying either one of those two.
I'm now trying to work through mechanically how you do that with the Dread Fiend, just because these are already designation hunter, so you wouldn't be able to go Aura Headstrong designation hunter only. Otherwise, you'd catch a few other units that you probably didn't want to have in that. I guess they could be dual designation. I think there's one other unit that has that, maybe. Maybe everything else is single designation. I'd be interested to see what it looked like mechanically for it to happen. You could probably even just give them Headstrong.
Well, I was thinking more give them Resilient and then give the Aura Headstrong to the Dread Fiend.
Anything we think that would change in terms of the way the list was played? Because this is one where we were referring to the Reapers. If we were to make the Fiends armor 6 and give some sort of pin mitigation or further resilience, does it change the way we play things? Are we then not taking Reapers? How does it change the way we play the list?
I would certainly be more tempted to take them, because I personally don't take an awful lot of specialists in my lists when I'm playing Night Stalkers, so I have the space to be able to put them in. You know very well, I argue that I think the Dread Fiend's also a bit expensive for what it does to try to get through, but you know, we're talking about these ones at the moment. That's the reason why I kind of go, I think Fiends need a little bit more than just an armor increase. You know, having armor 6 around nice, because that's something that Night Stalkers don't have an awful lot of. Generally, it's armor 5, which is a bit strange. It's not strange, I should say. The thing, the complication is, yes, they have stealthy, so they mitigate that coming through. But then when they're actually hitting, they really are glass hammers when they get into combat, because if they're not taking out a unit, or if they're not being very careful about what they're surgically attempting to remove, they're just going to get cut to pieces in the counterattack, and that's generally what happens. So, and that's the way they play, which is fine. They're probably said if you're a little more tactical than potentially Plague is slower, but they're more resilient. Yeah, I'm just trying to go into looking at other combat units in that regard, because as I said, they are very fragile. You've got to be very careful with your Night Stalkers. They're very fragile. They work in numbers in general, and they've got really big bases. They're hard to hide. And there's plenty of, and when they don't have any pin mitigation, there's plenty of ways to go through it, because you were saying before you don't like blazing away. Well, blazing away is a damn good way to get to impact Night Stalkers. You ignore
because
their
you're stealthy
and
anyway,
you
right?
pin
You
them.
don't mind hitting on 8s.
Precisely.
I will put one thing, that if we are to increase these to armor 6, does that now eat the Butcher's lunch? Because the Butchers are, of course, armor 5, 4 hit points. They're there as big meat bags. If we're to start making Fiends too durable, does that start to cut in on Butchers? I don't see them taking a huge amount either.
And they're awful slower, and that's where I kind of go. I would potentially prefer to leave the Butchers at armor 5 and take their assault to 5 and change that assault to Fiends to 4, because at least then you can take a massive Butchers and there are a whole bunch of wounds that you need to go to try to get through in that regard, and they can actually go into a transport where Fiends can't.
And they're also a Gorger unit, so can be healed back as well. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they do have different roles there, and that's kind of where I think that the Fiends at Assault 5 that's the weird bit that's a bit strange. Every other dedicated assault unit in the list is 4, but yet they're 5s, and the compensation seems to be the sure-footed, which, if you've got a clear line of sight, then you're no assaulting on 5s. So it's actually a downgrade. I'd rather have 4 and lose sure-footed, because you're actually better off.
All right, our final unit is the Asterian Escort, and we were just chatting about this one last episode. The Asterian Escort is speed 12-18 with shoot 4. Hooray! Armor 6, 4 hit points. Sounds fine so far. Nerve 4. Its keywords are anti-grav, shield 4, with targeting systems, and is a vehicle. It has controlled fire, hooray, and evade as its charge reactions. In terms of its armament, it has twin null cannons, and then it has a choice. It can either take a pulse bombard, which is range 6 to 36 with 3 dice, blast D2 indirect and pinning, or it can take a heavy fission beamer for an extra 20 points instead, which is range 24, 2D, AP4, anti-tank and devastating D2, or it can take a plasma vortex, which is different to the normal plasma vortex, which is normally 36-inch range. This is range 18, 2D, AP1 with blast D4 instead of D2 plus 1. So slightly different on the Escort. What's my diagnosis? Well, it's the same we heard last month. It just doesn't have a great role. In terms of raw anti-tank firepower, the Assassin just beats it hands down. It has these same twin null cannons that the Escort has, but has a railgun that reaches across the board and nails anything on the other side. In terms of durability, the Chroma is better, and it actually just turns all of its guns into one big gun on top for either anti-infantry or for anti-tank. And as Mike pointed out last episode as well, for cheaper, you can just go weapon platforms. They have the same guns, except often with better ranges than you see on the Escort. So that's kind of our diagnosis of the Escort's presentation. It just doesn't have a great role.
Well, I got no changes in what I said about it originally, what I think the problems are. I guess we potentially move into what we think we would do to fix it.
What would be your remedy for the Escort?
I don't know if I could steal it, but I would like to, I think because it's called an Escort and everything else, I would like to see it have a projecting kind of shield similar to what the Veermen have, and then you could probably move it up with something like Kalishi or something that doesn't have a shield in the first place. And then it actually truly would be an Escort for a particular type of unit.
Love it.
That's kind of what I would be looking at trying to do if it was possible. And I think that would then give it a role for it to actually do and live up to its name.
It's annoying that it doesn't have shield generator itself, and it also doesn't have the sort of shield projector. Where the shield projector mount is where it mounts its weapon. I'm sure with Asterian tech they'd have some way to cast that shield somewhere. I would love to have shields on my regular Matsudan. That sounds like an awesome thing to have. I appreciate you're probably only wanting to shield Kalishi with it, though. and
yeah, well, something along those
marionettes.
lines. Yeah, considering they're already like resilient too, and everything else. Yes, using them on Matt Sedan is probably going to be a little bit going on a bridge too far.
My thought for it was actually quite different, which is to sort of markedly change its role. In some ways, it's a little bit similar to the way it plays in Epic Warpath. In Epic Warpath, you take a unit of 2 chromas, but you have a unit of 3 escorts. So for mine, I would drop the escorts stats, make it worse, so you can then make it cheaper, and then make it 1 to 2 in a unit. So I'm thinking reduce its hit points to 3, so it's then the same hit points as the assassin. It's the same chassis, so it makes sense. Lose controlled fire, because that's I think for the chroma, but let it keep evade, because that means it's then someone charges it runs away. It's one of those sort of light fainting vehicles. I think that makes sense. I would probably decrease the heavy fission beamer upgrade to +10 and the plasma vortex to +5. Each of those are a bit overcosted looking at what the stats are on those guns. I'd also look to decrease the bombard range to 24-inch rather than the large 36-inch. So it's the plasma vortex, the pulse bombard, they're all having their ranges shrunk in order to go on this fast, agile vehicle intended to get in close and escort the infantry. It would mean the escort then plays in the same sort of space as gun tracks and rumblers, those sort of lighter support vehicles, the ones that come in units of 1 to 2, but because it's Asterians, they're not long range things. They're super fast, zipping in and dealing the damage that way. It's worth noting as well that taking a second escort in the unit, it would still only be shield 4. Obviously, that helps keep the points down. It's not like we're going to stack the shields, but it's better from a rules consistency standpoint as well. Ideally, I'd be looking to bring the unit cost down to around 80 to 90 if it's got the upgrades, so that you then don't feel bad about running 2 of them, and you've then got something which doesn't exist in the list, which is a light, fast, hard-hitting, dies fast escort gunship. That's what I'd do with the escorts.
Yeah, I mean, like Asterisk, this suffers from being a worse version of other things in the list, just like most of our options on here. I don't really agree with making it 1 to 2, mostly because just with the sheer size of it, that could make for some janky plays. I think, being able to have one out in the open and another one hidden behind a building so you can gain cover, quite possible considering, yeah, like I said, the size of them. One could be way out in the open, getting massive lines of sight and still be within 3 inches of the other one that's hidden completely behind a building. So that feels a bit
Is
wrong.
that something you'd do with gun tracks and so on as well?
Because they're not as massive, they don't have as much opportunity to get really good shooting lines. The leader has to be still near the cover that the other things are taking. Whereas with these, it's like 6 or so, it's over 6 inches across, isn't it? So it's enormous. You can have the tip of his left wing next to a building, so its friends hidden behind, and the tip of the right wing is like way out in the open now, like around all of the surrounding cover, because the thing's so enormous.
Because it does actually have a base. If you were to define it by its base, would you have fewer issues with it then?
That would be better, but still, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure with like things that are proper vehicles whether units of 2 is really the right approach. If you took this exact profile and put it on a 60 or 80 mil base or whatever, then yeah, like it would seem completely fine to take that approach. But as a massive vehicle, I don't know, in this game it doesn't feel quite the same.
I should also quickly just call out on your cover thing as well. So in terms of tracing line of sight, the imaginary line we trace for line of sight, if the line passes over no other unit or terrain feature to the bases of 50% or more of the models in the target unit, then line of sight is clear. So That means if it can see one of the models, then line of sight is clear to it.
Right, 50% or more. I thought it was more than 50%. So it's less janky.
Slightly less janky, but yeah.
But it's still like a unit of 2 massive things that have to try and fit somewhere.
It's the case with all Asterian vehicles. I mean, these are small Asterian vehicles compared to the Chroma and Kyra. It's just that they're still bigger than most other factions.
I think the only way you would possibly do them is just conga line them. Like, you got to have one behind the other because there's no other way to fit them anywhere. I had down as well, like just something to give it an actual escort or bodyguard ability would be the way that I would want to go. I'd already spitballed something like a free activation when it's near something that it's trying to escort or something like that could be an option as well. I think the defensive shielding is a great idea, but in a faction with lots of shields on units and then Matsudan, which God help us if they get more shields, that just feels a bit over, like it could be like that feels like the right thing to give it. But then the realities of what that would mean scare me. So I just think there's a lot of design space to have something cool, but, not just for the escort unit, but just something for a bodyguard or escort unit that could be applied to other things in other factions as well. Could be a way to differentiate a bunch of units and just sort of add a bit more depth to the game.
If we were to make all the changes, like I was saying, for dropping the points, so stripping out controlled fire, dropping its hit points, and reducing all the weapon ranges and so on, but we just kept it as 0 to 1. Well, sorry, we just kept it at 1 model instead of 1 to 2, but it started getting down towards 80 points. Would you take it then? Or is the support slot too precious?
I don't know that the support slot is actually really that precious in Asterians. Asterians can be quite an elite faction, so it would be worth considering as your anti-tank shooting instead of the assassin at that point, or maybe like instead of the default, my default 2 assassins, I would consider 1 assassin and then the escort.
You monster.
Mike?
I've been still pondering the whole defensive shielding routine, and I guess for that to sort of happen, the Macedon would have to be their own faction and get stripped back out of the Asterians again. Mind you, considering the Asterian list is so huge, I don't think that's going to impact it too much. And then it would be pretty easy then to say non-clade for defensive shielding, and you should be okay, because that'd be marionettes and Kalishi at that point. I'm pretty sure it would sort of. I don't
know if you'd need to exclude the clade, though, would you? I mean, because their shields will drop sometimes, and then you can still keep the shields on them.
But how would you handle double shields then?
As in a unit is being shielded twice.
Yeah, so you
shield 8, essentially shield 8.
Mm-hmm.
Hooray!
I didn't even like shield.
That's
4.
perfectly nice and normal. Same. I can understand being the Asterian player how you might think that might be okay. Perfectly balanced and normal.
All right. So those are 6 units we feel could use a little bit of love, and what we would think about changing in order to make them more viable in their lists and give them their own unique roles. Before we close out the episode, let's go into Overwatch. What is exciting us on the Firefight horizon at the moment? Mike?
For me, like I said, it's that spring con. It's a tournament coming up. I should be able to get to play. I've checked, and it's outside my son's football season. So now I'm starting to tinker with lists and having a look at what potentially I do need to paint to put into some of those lists and what I want to be able to take. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at the moment. Those tickets only went on sale this week, so I haven't had an awful lot of time to think about it yet.
Just still on the train of sitting patiently waiting for Nameless.
Well, we saw Ronnie's video just the other week where we actually saw him talking about what we'd expect in the new book, where he was talking about Warpath Fight Zone as he lined up the books. And of course, on the table as well, we saw a Hammer assault tank for the Marauders as well. So exciting to see what else we might get for factions which aren't the Nameless as well. So that was actually what was on my horizon, was the excitement we might be expecting when that book drops. So that brings us to the end of the episode. As always, if you have enjoyed this episode, please do consider liking, sharing, subscribing, posting a review. All of that helps us reach new people. Until next time, dust off your unloved units. Comparison is the thief of choice. And unleash controlled fire.
Hear the tales, fierce and